I'm ready to start my next project. I'm going to try to make some homemade Polish Golumpki. I'm using meatless meat, ground beef crumbles, so to speak, instead of beef. Since I started cooking at home during this time, I've really gone much more towards vegetarian cooking, and this is just another way to continue doing that. That groundless beef has about 18 grams of protein, so it does provide a good bit of protein that you would get if you used standard ground beef or other ground meat ingredients. As a side, I have some potatoes, and I'll show you those in a bit too. So I chopped up my parsley and my onions. I took the time to core out my cabbage, as you can see here. One of the things I forgot to include when in my initial show of ingredients was rice. I'm going to end up cooking a little bit of this, adding it in to everything else. And as promised, here are the potatoes I have as a side, but we'll get to them later. The next step is to boil the cabbage so I can use it to wrap my filling. I also have a pot of water getting ready to boil here. I'll parboil some rice there for about 10 minutes to add to the mixture, the filling. So I may actually have to spin the cabbage a little bit because my pot isn't deep enough, but in the end I think the goal is that it boils and loosens up a little bit, and not necessarily that it gets fully cooked. So it'll cook when it's actually in the oven. So I have my half cup of rice going in for a boil for about 10 minutes. Give it a little mix just to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot. And then over here, what I'm doing is I'm using my spatula of sorts to peel the cabbage while it's in the water. Get underneath the leaf, and it should peel right off. Now I might have a little bit too much water in here, in which case I'll take some out. But the idea is that you basically peel the cabbage and do your best to keep the leaves in a solid form so that they're not torn, and you can use them to wrap your Golumpki. For all my Polish friends, I apologize if my pronunciation is not correct. Let's call that American Polish. My cabbage is finished. I pretty much peeled it all the way down, and I'm going to have a bunch of leaves that I can use. My rice, parboiling, got about 2 minutes left on that. I definitely can see this being a winter dish, maybe not the heat of the summer, as I've been standing over the pot of boiling water to peel the leaves back. Obviously it's a little bit warm, and it's just May right now, so while the temperature's springtime weather, I could see in the summer this could be really warm. Now it's time for the onions. And this is where my version is going to differ a little bit from the standard version. So because I'm using the beefless ground beef, I'm actually going to cook it up a little bit once I've got these onions cooked a little bit. Normally you would just use raw meat, mix it all together, put it in, and then you're going to bake it for a while. I just want to cook it for a little bit since it's frozen, and hopefully makes it a little bit easier to work with. I know people may have different opinions, but one of my favorite smells in the entire world is sauteing onions. There's just something about it. Just the earthy, wholesome smell. I don't know. Personal preference. So I have my meatless ground beef in there, mixing everything together. I know people take different or have different opinions on sort of fake meat, and while I know it's maybe a little bit more processed than just using straight vegetables, it does give you protein. It tastes pretty good in my opinion, and for something like stuffed cabbage, if you want to make something traditional, it also seems like you need something that kind of stands in for ground beef. Stuffed cabbage Golumpki is one of those sort of traditional home-cooked foods that remind people of their grandparents or growing up, and it would be hard, I think, to replace that dish. To say you can have something that's like stuffed cabbage, but that isn't stuffed cabbage. So, just my take on things. Take it for what it's worth. So now I have my cabbage leaves boiled, my rice, my meat and onions, and the additional spices and things I need to pull the filling together. I'm gonna mix everything up and get it ready to go. One of the other things I did, as some of you may have seen my homemade vegetable stock recipe, the excess parsley and the onion skins that came off this, I'm going to, or I put in a bag, and this goes into the freezer, and when I need it, I'll just pull it out and I can make some really easy vegetable stock. Great way to make sure that nothing goes to waste. So I've got one pre-rolled on the top left there, and you can see what it looks like as it's getting ready to be rolled. You put a little bit of a slit in the bottom just so that you can work with the leaf, make it flat a little bit better, and then basically just roll it up, and then they'll be going in that pot in the back. We'll get there next. I have my Golumpki all rolled and in the pot. The next step is to add either water or tomato sauce. And to that end, I have some boiling water along with a can of tomato paste, 6-ounce can of tomato paste that I'm going to add to the water. I'll pour that in the pot. I also wound up with some extra cabbage leaves because it's hard to tell how many leaves are actually on a head of cabbage. So when I'm finished, I'm going to cover everything with some of these cabbage leaves before I put it in the oven. But I'll show you what everything looks like when it's ready to go. So my tomato sauce is ready to go into the baking dish. Maybe a little bit thinner than you'd normally have, let's say for spaghetti or something like that, but basically you want to cover everything so that they can cook, and hope you don't have a little bit of tomato paste left, but such is life. So now I got everything sauced up. I got the oven preheated to 350 degrees. Time to cover and get it into the oven. Now, Ordinarily, if you were cooking with raw meat, you'd want to cook it for about an hour and a half to 2 hours until the meat was fully cooked. Since I'm using a vegetarian meat substitute that's pre-cooked, I won't need to cook it that long. It's a little bit of a guessing game for me at this point, but we'll see how it turns out. Still add a little bit of extra cabbage, so it's cooked. Put a little salt on it, and it's a nice little snack. So they're out of the oven. I cooked them for about 20 minutes and actually changed the temperature to 400. I'm going to put these down underneath the ones that I'm going to eat. And they held together pretty well. I didn't use toothpicks or string or anything that sometimes you see. One more thing to do. Add a little, maybe a little, not a lot. Add a lot of fresh parsley. Now I'm ready to eat. As I mentioned earlier, I have some red and white potatoes that are boiled up. Just toss them with a little olive oil, salt and pepper and dill, and everything's ready to go. Thanks for watching. It turns out that 20 minutes at 400 degrees wasn't long enough. While they tasted good, I put them back in the oven for an additional 45 minutes at 350, and when they were finished, everything was soft, everything was fully cooked. They were really delicious. Perfect.